When I discovered that the $500,000 I had painstakingly borrowed from various sources had dwindled to just $250 in my bank account, I was stunned. I was about to call the police, but my wife smashed my phone to the ground with a look of disdain and said, "Don't make a fuss. I transferred the money to Ethan." I questioned her why she sent the money to her childhood friend. She replied, "Ethan's company is just starting out. He needs a good car to make a good impression for business. Besides, didn't you say that your money is my money, so I can spend it however I want?" I stared at my familiar yet unfamiliar wife, speechless. That $500,000 was her life-saving money. Without it, it wasn't me who would die, but her. Tomorrow was the day we had an appointment with the doctor at the hospital. I took out the bank card from the bedroom, trying to keep my expression from looking too sad, wanting to talk to Victoria about her terminal illness. But when I checked the balance with the app, I almost fainted. The original $500,000 had turned into $250. My hands were shaking, and it took me a while to think of calling the police. Just then, Victoria, who had just come home and was changing clothes in the bedroom, was startled by my ghostly appearance. She questioned, "Sincere, who are you making that face for?" I anxiously said, "Honey, the money. The money in the card is gone." Victoria's expression changed slightly, but she remained calm. I said, "No, there was $500,000 in there. We need to call the police. Someone must have stolen it." Before I could finish, Victoria nonchalantly said, "Don't make a fuss. I took the money." I breathed a slight sigh of relief and said, "Transfer the money back quickly. I need to go." Victoria interrupted me with a glare. "Give it back to you? I can't. The money is gone. I spent it all." I knew Victoria was a big spender, but it was impossible to spend $500,000 in a day. I asked in disbelief, "What did you spend $500,000 on in one day?" Annoyed by my questioning, Victoria finally said, "Ethan's company is just starting out. He needs a good car to make a good impression for business. Besides, didn't you say that your money is my money? So I can spend it however I want. Buying a car for a man is a big deal. If I don't support him now, it would ruin his life. Keeping the $500,000 with you is useless. Giving it to Ethan is spending money where it counts. Ethan even said I saved his life. Ethan." My head was throbbing with anger, my whole body cold. I gritted my teeth and said, "Your childhood friend Ethan, you need to get the money back from him. This is not a small matter. This is." Before I could finish, Victoria slapped me across the face. I was stunned. Victoria scolded, "You're a grown man, aren't you done yet? It's just $500,000. Is it worth making such a fuss? Ethan will pay it back once his company is on track. Not just $500,000. He'll give me $5 million. Do you think everyone is like you, making a big deal out of $500,000? Ethan is going to be the CEO of a listed company. If we weren't childhood friends, like siblings, he wouldn't even need your $500,000. This is a disguised investment, understand?" I was speechless. $5 million. That pie in the sky was really big and round. The pie you probably can't eat, but the illness is quite serious. I tried to control my emotions and said as calmly as possible, "In the future, $5 million, $50 million, $500 million, it doesn't matter. You must get this $500,000 back now. It's really important. It's our family's life-saving money." Victoria rolled her eyes and said angrily, "The money is already out. Don't I need to save face? I'm telling you, even if this $500,000 is your life-saving money, I would still take it. Besides, your worthless life might not even be worth that much." Damn. Hearing her say that, I actually calmed down a bit. Victoria always thought I was incompetent. Once she wanted to buy a $10,000 bag, but I couldn't afford it. At that time, I was borrowing and saving money for her illness and couldn't come up with $10,000 for a bag. Unexpectedly, Victoria thought I was hoarding $500,000 and not letting her spend it. Now she was insulting me, making me look like a clown. Fine, let it be. But no matter what, the money can't be given away for nothing. So I said, "If you don't go, I'll go get it myself. If he doesn't return it, I'll sue him. Let's see who wins then." Victoria ignored me and got even angrier because I was being persistent. She said, "Are you crazy? If you go now, where will my face go?" Victoria paused for a moment and then said, "I can go get the money, but Ethan lives far from us. If I get the money, it will be too late. I'll have to stay at a nearby hotel for the night." She started humming a tune and picking out clothes in the bedroom. She said, "Don't call me tonight to bother me, okay?" I stood at the bedroom door, watching Victoria hold a dress against her body, comparing it. After a long time, she chose a black fitted dress and casually picked up a set of sexy lingerie and stockings. Just as she was about to put them on, she saw me still standing at the door. She rolled her eyes and kicked the door shut. She said, "You're like a pervert staring at me every day. It's disgusting." I looked at the closed bedroom door and sighed. Victoria and I had been married for 3 years, and our relationship had been stable. Although not passionate, we rarely argued. But last year, after her childhood friend Ethan got divorced and returned to town, everything changed. Victoria started staying out all night and arguing with me. Every time I got angry, she would say I was petty and had dirty thoughts, insisting that she and Ethan were innocent. She said, "If Ethan and I had anything going on, we would have been married long ago. You wouldn't even have a chance." I was a bit thick-skinned and thought Victoria's words made some sense, so I didn't think too much about it. Instead, I believed her worsening behavior was due to her terminal illness and emotional instability. I was only focused on gathering enough money for the surgery, planning to donate half of my liver to cure her. I thought that once she recovered, she would appreciate my efforts, and we could live a good life together. But now I realized that Victoria's behavior wasn't because of her illness. She simply liked Ethan and despised me. After a while, Victoria finished dressing up and came out. She wore the latest trendy makeup that looked natural, and her figure was accentuated by a fitted dress. Even if I was slow-witted, I could see that she wasn't going to collect a debt, but rather to deliver something. Thinking of this, I sighed deeply and said, "Victoria, let's get a divorce." As I spoke, I contacted a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. Now all the family assets were reduced to a few $100s. I wasn't sure if Victoria had any personal assets, and I didn't want to pursue it. The only thing left was this house, which my parents had bought with their retirement savings and my hard work before they passed away. I couldn't let Victoria have it. Victoria didn't hear me mention the divorce at all. After dressing up, she went straight out the door, leaving me staring at the divorce agreement in a daze, my eyes slowly welling up. The divorce agreement became increasingly blurry as I recalled the bits and pieces of our 3 years of marriage. I considered myself a qualified husband, but she was no longer a qualified wife. As dawn broke, I finally fell asleep, only to be awakened by the loud bang of the door. Victoria was back. She was wobbling in high heels, her cheeks flushed, and the smell of alcohol was strong even from a distance. The red marks on her neck were particularly glaring, clearly kiss marks. My heart ached and I clenched my fists, my knuckles cracking. I sighed and shook my head, not wanting to argue anymore. I said slowly, "Victoria, let's get a divorce." This time, Victoria heard me clearly. The smell of alcohol seemed to dissipate and her consciousness gradually returned. She looked at me in disbelief. I continued helplessly, "I've already drafted the divorce agreement. It's on the table in the living room. You just need to sign it." After the initial shock, Victoria's eyebrows furrowed, and she pointed at me, cursing, "Sincere, you're really petty. I didn't misjudge you. It's just $500,000. Is it worth it?" I looked at Victoria coldly, my heart devoid of any waves. I asked, "The $500,000. Don't you know where those marks on your neck came from?" My tone was calm, but each word hit her heart like a heavy hammer. Victoria's face turned pale instantly. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain that they were mosquito bites, but she couldn't say a word. She seemed to finally realize that our problem had far exceeded the scope of $500,000. I said slowly, "Victoria, you've changed. You've become a stranger to me. I don't know what you've been doing outside, but I can no longer endure this life. Let's get a divorce. It's good for both of us." I reiterated my decision and turned to leave the bathroom. Victoria walked out of the bathroom, picked up the divorce agreement on the table, and looked at it with anger in her eyes. Her face turned dark and she threw the agreement at my face, scolding, "I didn't see it before, but you're really this kind of person. Fine, we can get a divorce. But this house belongs to me, and you leave with nothing." Hearing this, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. This house was bought with my parents' retirement savings, their hard-earned money. If I gave it to Victoria, she would definitely let Ethan move in. How could my parents' spirits in heaven be happy seeing their hard-earned marital home being dirtied by those two adulterers? Victoria's words were indeed disheartening. All the family money had been given to Ethan, and now she wanted me to leave with nothing. The happiness of our marriage was now as miserable as it could be. I looked at Victoria and said, "This house must belong to me, and you must get back the $500,000. Victoria was stunned for a moment, her eyes darting around as if she was thinking about something. After a long time, she changed to a gentle expression and said slowly, "Sincere, let me think about this. The house and the money, I need to think it over." I sighed lightly and shook my head helplessly. I said, "Fine, think it over." With that, I walked into the bedroom. Although Victoria and I lived in the same house, we had been separated for a long time. Our only son was fostered at Victoria's mother's house because we didn't have time to take care of him. Victoria liked Ethan so much that she would definitely agree to the divorce. She would even agree to leave with nothing. Sigh, she must have gone to discuss it with that guy. But it's also good. I need to find an opportunity to bring my son back and discuss it with him. My son and Victoria didn't have a good relationship. They were like strangers. Since he was born and after the full moon, I had been taking care of him. If I hadn't seen him being carried out of the delivery room with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe he was her child. People say that women are weak, but mothers are strong. But in Victoria, I didn't see any motherly love that a mother should have. Sure enough, around 11 or 12 at night, I heard Victoria and Ethan talking and laughing in the next room, which was Victoria's bedroom. Because the soundproofing wasn't good, I heard it clearly. Ethan said, "That guy wants to divorce me." "Great." Ethan replied, "Divorce? Really? Then I can openly have you." Victoria said, "But that man said I have to leave with nothing." The rest of their conversation was too quiet for me to hear clearly. Based on what I know about Ethan, he's just a leech, a gold digger. He's only after Victoria's money. If Victoria leaves with nothing, it won't be good for Ethan. In other words, he definitely won't agree to Victoria leaving with nothing. How would he survive? Do you think he really loves Victoria? He only likes the benefits she provides. According to the lawyer I consulted, if it comes to a divorce lawsuit and I can prove Victoria's infidelity, it would be very advantageous for me. Victoria might leave with nothing. The sounds from the next room kept piercing my heart. Victoria at this moment was like a cat in heat being teased by Ethan, with her delicate voice occasionally heard. In all the years of our marriage, I had never seen her like this. I always thought she didn't like it, but it turns out it wasn't that. It was just that I wasn't the one in her heart. Victoria said, "Ethan, your kisses are too much today. You've marked up my neck." Ethan replied, "Am I better or is your husband better?" Victoria snorted and said, "You're so annoying. You know the answer and still ask." Her laughter and prolonged coquettish voice were like sharp knives, deeply stabbing my remaining pride and self-esteem. My eyes were bloodshot, and I wanted to grab a knife and confront Ethan. But I knew that was wrong. Impulsiveness is the devil. Ethan wasn't worth it. I wanted to return all the hurt they caused me. I didn't sleep at all that night, consumed by pain and sadness. I decided to take a leave from work to gather evidence of Victoria's infidelity. I dressed very discreetly, wearing clothes Victoria had never seen before, a black baseball cap and a mask. To avoid being exposed, I even rented a car. Victoria usually left work early, around 3 p.m., But since Ethan came back, she always came home late. Whenever I asked her, she would say, "Why do you care? Use that time to earn more money instead of just being a tyrant at home." After hearing it many times, I stopped asking. I never suspected Victoria of cheating because I believed everything she said. It wasn't because I was stupid, but because I trusted her too much. The one who hurt me turned out to be the person I trusted the most. I waited in the car for Victoria to get off work. As the end of the workday approached, a black Audi pulled up in front of her office building. The new license plate and the shiny black body with its cool rims gleamed under the sunlight. I recognized this car, the latest model Audi. I had looked at it online for days but couldn't afford it. I could only admire it. At that moment, I felt a pang of envy. The next second, Victoria walked out of the office with her head down, looking shy. Her female colleague teased, "Victoria, your boyfriend is here with a new car to pick you up again." Victoria waved her hand and said, "Don't talk nonsense, he's just a friend." The colleague laughed and said, "What kind of friend is so good? Get me one too. Don't hide it from us. We can all see it. This guy is much better than your boyfriend." The colleague said goodbye to Victoria, who didn't refute, but rather enjoyed it. That's when I realized the person driving the black Audi was Ethan. Victoria said she gave Ethan $500,000 to buy a new car, and it was this car. My heart ached as I recalled the scenes of me working hard to gather money for her treatment. When I found out Victoria had cancer, I almost went crazy. Fearing she would give up in despair, I didn't tell her. Instead, I decided to sell everything and borrow money to treat her. I humbly borrowed from relatives and friends, not missing any opportunity. I tried every connection I could find and finally gathered $500,000. I even thought if it wasn't enough, I would sell the house to treat her. But she gave the life-saving money I borrowed for her to Ethan to buy a car. My heart felt like it was in an icy cold cellar. Victoria wore a red strapless dress, black stockings, and high heels, swaying as she got into Ethan's car. When she went on dates with me, she never dressed so provocatively. Sometimes she didn't even bother to put on makeup, saying it was to save money for me. I believed her, thinking she was a rare good wife, which made me cherish her even more. But the reality in front of me was a harsh slap in the face. After Victoria got in the car, it didn't drive away immediately, but stayed for a while. Through the car window, I saw Victoria and Ethan kissing. Her red lips were swollen from the biting, her eyes dazed. It suffocated me to see this. She was doing this right in front of her office with Ethan. Did she think I was a fool? Although Victoria's infidelity was undeniable, seeing this still hurt. It wasn't the infidelity that pained me, but the feeling of being unworthy. I took out my phone and recorded the scene. Over the years, I worked hard to earn money for this small family. I once thought marrying Victoria was the happiest thing in my life, but reality gave me a heavy blow. The car slowly drove away and I quickly followed. After a long drive, the Audi finally stopped in front of a restaurant. She sat across from a man, talking and laughing, the atmosphere harmonious. This was the first time I saw Ethan in a long time. He hadn't changed at all, as if time had left no mark on him. In contrast, I had been worn down by life, like a skeleton drained by family responsibilities, no longer the spirited person I once was. Ethan was wearing a well-tailored white shirt, his hair meticulously styled, looking both fashionable and natural. In contrast, my attire seemed so casual and sloppy, as if I had completely lost my passion for life. Ethan placed a piece of fruit on a fork and brought it to Victoria's mouth. She opened her mouth slightly and ate the fruit from Ethan's hand, a happy smile appearing on her face. Ethan gently wiped the salad dressing from the corner of Victoria's mouth with his finger. They looked like a couple deeply in love. At that moment, my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. I had never seen her so relaxed and happy, as if all her smiles and tenderness were given to this man, not me. I hid in a corner, silently observing them. I tried to catch some clues from their conversation, but I was too far away to hear what they were saying. I could only see the love and understanding in their eyes, something I had never seen in her eyes before. "Sir, do you need anything?" A waiter approached me. I instinctively lowered my baseball cap and glanced at the menu. A small cake cost $200 and a glass of juice was $50. Outrageous prices. I was shocked. Ethan had brought Victoria to such an upscale place. I frowned and closed the menu gently, feeling a mix of emotions. The prices at this restaurant far exceeded my expectations. As someone who worked day and night for the family, saving every penny, even adding an egg to my pancake was a luxury. Watching Victoria and Ethan enjoy high-end food in each other's company, my heart felt like it was being tightly squeezed, the pain unbearable. If it weren't for my sham marriage with Victoria, my life could have been carefree. With a monthly salary of $2,000, I could have lived comfortably. But Victoria's spending was too high. Every month my salary went directly to her account. I used to immerse myself in this mode of interaction, thinking it was a sign of being a good husband and loving my wife. Earning $2,000 a month, I couldn't afford good cigarettes. To buy cheap clothes, I often shopped during the off-season, all to make Victoria feel she didn't regret marrying me and could be happy. I shook my head and looked at the waiter, saying, "Just a glass of water, please." The waiter was a bit surprised, a hint of disdain in his eyes, then left with the menu and brought me a glass of water. I continued to observe Ethan and Victoria. After their intimate meal, they left arm in arm. I captured their intimate moments on camera and followed them from a distance. The photos I took would be the only evidence of this relationship. I followed them from a distance, my heart filled with conflict and struggle. They walked through bustling streets and entered a high-end residential area. I stood at the entrance, watching them take the elevator upstairs. A few minutes later, I followed. The area was quiet during the day, indicating it was likely Ethan's residence. I walked quietly, following from a distance. Victoria was truly shameless. My heart kept cursing her. The next scene shocked me. Before they even entered the room, Victoria and Ethan were tightly embracing, entwined with each other, their eyes filled with passion, like a thunderstorm. Ethan's hands were in places they shouldn't be. The sight of their entanglement made my head spin, my anger threatening to consume me. I recalled the times Victoria and I were intimate, feeling nauseous. I quickly took out my phone and recorded everything. After capturing the scene, I left that filthy place. Downstairs, I took out my phone and called Victoria. The phone rang for a long time before she answered. I even heard Ethan's voice in the background. He said, "Who is it? Hang up." His voice was breathless. Victoria impatiently said, "Why are you calling me? What do you want?" Suppressing my anger, I asked, "Where are you? What's the matter? Just say it. Stop being so annoying." Victoria's voice was filled with irritation and urgency. I could hear her soft, coquettish sounds, knowing she was with Ethan. I didn't expose her. I said, "I'm cooking at home. Are you coming back to eat?" Victoria's tone was unfriendly with a hint of anger and urgency. "No, the company has a meeting today. I'll be back late." The phone slipped from my hand, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. I stood there as if the whole world had stopped. I suddenly realized that all those times she said the company had meetings, she was lying to me. It was terrifying to think about. In the past, I would have believed her. She might have even come home and said, "Honey, you worked hard." I slowly picked up the phone, looking at the screen showing the call had ended. I knew this relationship had come to an end. That night, Victoria came home late as usual. I had already fallen asleep. Victoria made a lot of noise when she came back, not caring about my feelings. She slammed the door shut and went into the bathroom. The sound of running water echoed. In the past, I would have left her dinner and prepared clothes for her to shower. Now, thinking about my past willingness to give, I felt foolish. After washing up, Victoria knocked on my bedroom door. When I didn't answer, she opened the door and walked in. She was wearing a thin nightgown, barely covering what needed to be covered. The marks Ethan left on her body were even more obvious, on her arms, chest, neck, everywhere. "Victoria, you don't even bother to hide it anymore." I felt utterly disheartened. Victoria looked at me with disdain and slowly said, I'm here to talk about the divorce. I've made up my mind." I sat up from the bed. I said seriously, "Yes, divorce is good for both of us. Why cling to this?" It felt like I was saying it to myself. Victoria wouldn't cling to me. She couldn't wait to draw a line between us and never see me again. Ever since Ethan appeared, Victoria's heart was no longer in this home. Victoria's lips curled into a wicked smile, not even wanting to look at me. Her gaze fell on our wedding photo, where we were smiling brightly, our faces filled with happiness, as if the other person was our entire world. Victoria glanced at me and said, "We can divorce, but the house and the $500,000 are mine. Additionally, you need to pay me $1 million in compensation." My eyes widened, stunned by Victoria's outrageous demand. She cheated, wanted me to leave with nothing, and demanded $1 million in compensation. Compensation for what? Victoria, I really underestimated her. I sneered and said slowly, "Did Ethan teach you this?" At the mention of Ethan, Victoria's face changed dramatically, as if I had stripped her naked. She became angry and scolded me. "Sincere, what do you mean? Am I that worthless in your eyes?" I didn't say anything, just looked at Victoria's appearance and couldn't help but want to laugh. If Victoria had said this before, I would have believed her and even apologized for my suspicion. Now it seemed Victoria was quite the actress. The Oscars owed her a little gold statue. She snorted and said, "No matter what you think, my demands are here. You have to agree whether you like it or not." Victoria's tone was very unfriendly. My heart had already turned cold, completely hurt by Victoria. The last time I felt this much pain was when my parents passed away. It took me half a year to recover. I thought I would never feel this much pain again, but now I had to go through it once more. I calmed my emotions and said, "I don't agree." Hearing my refusal, Victoria's face turned black. Mentioning Ethan made her face turn ashen, as if I had touched her most sensitive nerve. Her eyes widened, her lips pressed tightly together, and her whole body exuded an indescribable anger. "Sincere, you dare not agree?" Victoria's voice was sharp and piercing, as if it would tear the whole room apart. I said coldly, "What can you do if I don't agree? Don't think I don't know what you and Ethan have been doing. If I weren't this angry, I wouldn't have said such things to Victoria. It's a waste of breath. For people like her, only when life hits her hard will she wake up." Victoria seemed stunned by my words. First she was surprised, then anger filled her face. She said, "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to accuse me? Look at yourself. You have nothing. I've had enough of this life. I want a divorce. I want to pursue my happiness." Victoria's words were harsh. Living with such a woman for a few more years, I might get a terminal illness too. What a having nothing and pursuing happiness. Only you, Victoria, could justify infidelity as pursuing happiness. Infidelity during marriage is condemned by all, but you beautify it as pursuing happiness. Why don't you just die? I didn't want to argue with her anymore and said directly, "Do whatever you want. I won't give you a penny. And the $500,000 you gave to Ethan must be returned to me." After saying that, I lay down in bed, ignoring Victoria. She was so angry she almost exploded, clutching her chest, her face ugly. She bit her lip and said, "Let's see if you have the ability." Seeing I didn't respond, Victoria made a fuss for a while and then slammed the door and left. The next day, I received Victoria's divorce lawsuit. This was within my expectations. I wanted Victoria to sue for divorce first. Now that she had a terminal illness, if I filed for divorce and she was later diagnosed, relatives and friends would think I divorced her because I knew about her illness. Then I would be labeled as a heartless husband who abandoned his wife in her most difficult time. That's not the outcome I wanted. The truth was Victoria cheated, not that I didn't want to treat her. So Victoria filing for divorce was the best. The next day I brought my child back from my hometown. Before leaving, Victoria's mother told me to be good to Victoria, saying she was willful and I should be more tolerant. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Victoria's parents hadn't worked for years. My parents passed away early, and I had been supporting Victoria's parents. As for Victoria, the little money she earned wasn't enough for her own expenses. She had always been spending my money. Talking about tolerance and understanding was nonsense. I was too tolerant, which led to her cheating and doing such disgusting things to me. Victoria's family was like a parasitic plant, sucking the blood out of me. In the past 2 days, news of my divorce with Victoria spread like wildfire. Many relatives and friends called to persuade me not to divorce. I explained the reason to each of them, saying it wasn't me who wanted the divorce but Victoria who cheated and wanted to pursue her happiness. When I got emotional, I even choked up, making those who called to comfort me speechless. They stopped persuading me and instead comforted me, saying it was okay to live alone. Victoria's mother even came over in person, angrily scolding me as soon as she entered the door. She said, "What did our Victoria do wrong that you want a divorce? Without our Victoria, you wouldn't be where you are today." My son stood in front of me, his small body trying to protect me. I was moved and pulled him back behind me. I said coldly, "It's your daughter who wants the divorce, not me." For once, Victoria's mother looked genuinely shocked. I guessed she was wondering if Victoria had lost her mind wanting to divorce me. She didn't believe it and continued to argue, praising Victoria and telling me not to be ungrateful. Yes, Victoria. Without her, I think my life would be much better now. Isn't my current situation all thanks to her? To shield my son from this ugliness, I sent him to the study and then coldly told Victoria's mother, "If you don't believe me, call Victoria yourself." After saying that, I didn't bother with her anymore. If I could show her the photos I took, I would have thrown those filthy pictures in her face, letting her see how disgraceful her daughter was. But it wasn't necessary at the moment. Victoria's mother, with trembling fingers, dialed Victoria's number. She asked quietly, "Victoria, Sincere says you want to divorce him. Is that true?" Moments later, her face changed dramatically, as if she had heard something unbelievable. She said, "No, you can't divorce. Victoria, do you know what this means for us?" Victoria's mother was now at an emotional peak, her face contorted and terrifying. I could guess what Victoria had said. She must have agreed to the divorce. For Victoria, she couldn't wait to divorce me and be with Ethan. After hanging up, Victoria's mother glanced at me but said nothing more. Her face, however, looked extremely unpleasant, as if she had been deeply shocked. I ignored her and went into the study. Although my son had been living with his grandmother for the past 2 years, I saw him every weekend. He spent more time with me than anyone else. So when Victoria's mother scolded me, my son stood in front of me, trying to protect me. I was deeply moved. Without a family, without relatives, without a wife, I still had a son who loved me, and I loved him. I took my son's hand and said, "Son, your mom and I are getting a divorce. Do you want to live with Dad or Mom?" His big eyes immediately filled with tears, looking very pitiful. I gently stroked his head, my face calm. He looked up at me and asked, "Does Mom not want me?" His young voice trembled. I didn't want to hurt him, but he had the right to know about the divorce. I wiped his tears and said, "Dad wants you. You'll live with Dad from now on." He nodded obediently, not crying or making a fuss, showing a maturity beyond his years. That evening, Victoria came home reeking of alcohol. My son and I were having dinner in the living room. She looked unhappy, her face showing displeasure. It was rare for her to come home this early, but she didn't even glance at us and went straight to her room. It was clear she had argued with Ethan. I gave my son a piece of chicken and patted his head. For me, Victoria arguing with Ethan at this point was not a good thing. What if she refused to divorce? Then the blame would fall on me. After putting my son to bed, I heard Victoria talking in her room. She was on the phone with Ethan. "I told you to find out how much property that guy has," Ethan said. "How would I know? How do I investigate?" "I don't even know how," Victoria replied. Victoria had a habit of putting her phone on speaker and talking loudly, so I heard their scheming clearly. Ethan was teaching Victoria how to calculate my assets. No wonder she came home angry. They must have argued about the divorce. It's true that you can't guard against a thief at home. Now they were plotting against me. For years, my salary went directly to her account. I didn't even have $100 on me. When I found out she had a terminal illness, my first thought was to sell everything to treat her. But she teamed up with another man to plot against me. It's laughable. As soon as Ethan finished speaking, Victoria stormed into my room without even knocking. She asked, "Sincere, where's the money? Did you hide it?" Victoria's opening was a direct attack. Facing such an unreasonable person, I didn't even know how to respond. I said, "What money? Don't you know? All these years, hasn't the money always gone to your account? I should be asking you this." My son wasn't sleeping in the same room with me. Otherwise, seeing his mother's true face would leave a lifelong shadow. Victoria paused for a moment and then continued, "Who knows if you hid it? Where did all the money go over the years? No wonder you want a divorce. You must have hidden the money. You're really heartless." Seeing she had no ground to stand on, Victoria started to argue irrationally, scolding me harshly. Her words deeply hurt me. I thought my heart was already numb, but I didn't expect it to still hurt this much. For years I worked hard, like a beast of burden, waking up earlier than the chickens and sleeping later than the dogs, all for this small family. I never thought about myself, let alone hiding money. The clothes I wore were faded, some even patched. In the end, this was the result. "Victoria, you really are heartless." Looking at her beautiful face, I felt a chill. Victoria, seeing I wasn't speaking, shouted at me, "Speak! Why aren't you saying anything now?" I said coldly, "Money? You're asking me about money? Didn't you take it to buy Ethan a car? Now you're asking me about money?" Victoria seemed stunned by my words, paused for a moment, then angrily threw out a parting shot. "Don't let me find out you have any private assets, or I'll make your life miserable." With a slam of the door, Victoria left. Her harsh words left me with mixed feelings. My son's school notified me about a parent-teacher meeting, preferably attended by mothers. As the theme was centered around female education, I thought about calling Victoria to attend, hoping she could at least participate in this meeting for our son's sake. When I called, her impatient voice came through. "What is it?" "There's a parent-teacher meeting at Xiao Chen's school. It's best if the mother can attend." Before I could finish, Victoria angrily interrupted, "What parent-teacher meeting? You can't even handle such a small thing. What's the point of you? Useless." Her scolding left me disappointed. I didn't expect her to have such an attitude towards our son's matters. It was truly disheartening. Over the years, I had taken care of all the big and small things for our son, managing household chores and tutoring him after work. Fortunately, he was well behaved and didn't cause trouble. I looked at my son, his face full of determination. He said, "Dad, it's okay. You can go with me. It's fine if Mom doesn't want to." I was surprised and touched by his maturity. It was a necessity, but it still pained me. I took my son to the school gate where many parents had already gathered, mostly mothers with their children. It seemed I was the only exception. However, my son didn't feel any different. Someone asked, "Are you Xiao Chen's parent?" "Xiao Chen has good grades. Why didn't his mother come?" Today, we specifically asked for mothers to attend. A young female teacher warmly greeted us. I smiled awkwardly and made an excuse, but seeing this scene still made me feel emotional. What kind of mother is like this? Fortunately, my son wasn't attached to Victoria. Otherwise, it would have been troublesome. During the parent-teacher meeting, there was a segment where children were asked to talk about their mother's strengths and weaknesses. I was curious about what my son would say. All the children spoke earnestly, praising their mothers, even mentioning minor flaws. But when it was my son's turn, he shocked me. He said, "My mom is a terrible person. She doesn't like my dad but still married him, always thinking about cheating him out of money. She has no strengths. I don't like her at all." My son's words stunned me, and the other parents were equally shocked. I thought my son knew nothing about Victoria's actions, but he saw through everything. It brought tears to my eyes. The pain Victoria had caused me over the past few days eased a bit. Everyone's eyes turned to me, and I smiled awkwardly, quickly picking up my son. I said, "Kids say the darndest things." Back home, Victoria, for some reason, had brought Ethan over. When the cat's away, the mice will play. Ethan sat on the sofa, his hands casually resting on the sides, looking very comfortable, as if it were his own home. When he saw me, a disdainful and playful smile appeared on his face. He said, "Who do we have here? Bringing the little one back too?" I looked at Ethan with a complex expression, about to speak when my son spoke first. "Get out, you bad guy." My son threw his toy gun at Ethan, hitting him squarely. Ethan's face darkened and he cursed, "Old trash, and the kid's a freak too." Just then Victoria came out wearing a bathrobe smelling strongly of perfume. In all our years together, I rarely saw her use perfume after a bath. Her hair was still wet, and she must have heard the commotion outside, rushing out of the bathroom. She asked, "Sincere, what's going on? Can't you control Xiao Chen? If he hurts Ethan, can you afford to pay?" Victoria hurried to Ethan, her face full of concern, brushing off his clothes. She asked, "Are you okay?" Seeing Victoria's concern was laughable. When had she ever cared for me like this? I used to think Victoria was just a cold person, not good with words, but it turned out she gave her care to those she wanted to. It seemed my son wasn't as important to her as Ethan. She scolded our son, who was her flesh and blood, as if he were just mine alone. "Victoria, have I been too good to you, letting you hurt me without any scruples?" I stood in front of my son and said to Victoria, "Who allowed you to bring him here?" This seemed to touch a nerve with Victoria. Her face changed, and she looked at Ethan, standing protectively in front of him, shouting, "Do I need your permission to bring someone home? This house will be mine. I can bring whoever I want." Her words were so self-righteous that my anger flared up. We hadn't even gone to court yet, and she couldn't wait to bring her lover home. I sent my son to the study and said, "Be good. Dad and Mom need to talk. You go inside first." My son looked at me, then at Victoria and Ethan, his eyes full of complexity. After my son went into the study, I closed the door and said to Victoria, "Victoria, this house was bought with my parents' retirement money. It's in their name. Get it straight." My words seemed to have completely enraged Victoria. Her face was full of disbelief, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Perhaps in her eyes I had always been an honest man. Once the shock wore off, Victoria was utterly furious. She gritted her teeth and said, "What do you mean, Sincere? I never thought you were this kind of person. I must have been blind to marry you." Victoria was almost shouting, her face looking very unpleasant. Beside her, Ethan watched me with a look of amusement. Victoria's words should have been mine. I must have been blind to marry her. Seeing I didn't respond, Victoria grabbed Ethan's hand in front of me and said, "Not only am I bringing Ethan here, but let me tell you, Ethan will be living here from now on. What can you do about it?" Victoria stared at me arrogantly, as if she could see through all my helplessness. Her eyes were full of provocation and triumph, as if she had completely controlled the situation and crushed me. My anger burned like a raging fire. I clenched my fists, trying hard to control my emotions. I looked at Victoria, her face becoming blurry in my eyes, replaced by memories of our past happiness and the current devastation. After a moment, I said slowly, "Fine. If you're so eager to have your lover move in, I won't stop you. But don't regret it later." Victoria was stunned for a moment, then laughed mockingly. She said, "I think you're crazy. Fine, let's see what you can do." With that, she pulled Ethan into the room. Ethan's face showed a smug smile, looking very disgusting. Even Victoria's mother could see through Ethan, but she was infatuated with him, as if he had cast a spell on her. This house was left by my parents. Victoria's behavior was disgusting enough, but now she wanted to defile this house. It was revolting. If my parents' spirits saw this, they might fight her, but I didn't indulge her. I picked up my phone and called the police. "Hello, this is 99 building, 99 Orange Street. Someone has trespassed into my house." As the owner of the house, Ethan's presence could be considered trespassing. If Victoria was so shameless, let everyone see her true face. I went into the room and waited for the police. Laughter occasionally came from Victoria's room. The police were very efficient, arriving quickly. Several officers entered the room professionally. Victoria and Ethan's faces turned ugly. Victoria hadn't expected me to call the police. She looked at me in shock, her eyes filled with anger and fear. The lead officer asked, "Who called the police? What's going on here?" His eyes moved between Victoria and me. I stood up and calmly explained the situation. "I called the police. This man moved in without my permission." Victoria wanted to argue, but the officers didn't give her a chance. They began questioning both sides and checked the property ownership. Once confirmed, the officers looked at Victoria more sternly. They said, "According to the law, moving in without the owner's permission is trespassing. Mr. Ethan, please cooperate with our investigation and leave the premises." Ethan's face turned ashen. He tried to seek help from Victoria with his eyes, but she looked helpless and even a bit disheveled. In the end, Ethan was taken away by the police. Since Victoria and I were still legally married, the police didn't do anything to her. After Ethan left, Victoria glared at me and said, "Fine, you've got guts, just wait." She changed her clothes and slammed the door, probably going to find Ethan. With Ethan taken away by the police, Victoria couldn't sit still. After Victoria left, the world became peaceful. The next day, I received Victoria's divorce lawsuit. It seemed she had planned it with Ethan. In court, Victoria fabricated facts and argued irrationally. Her ugly face was unforgettable. She cried and made a scene, probably well practiced. If you didn't know the truth, you might be deceived. The judge looked at Victoria with sympathy until I presented evidence of her infidelity. Everyone looked at Victoria in shock. She was also stunned, as if struck by lightning. Her once defiant eyes became hollow and lifeless. After a moment of silence, she suddenly became furious, her face turning red as if all the blood had rushed to her face. She pointed at me, her finger trembling with anger, her voice sharp and piercing. She shouted, "You're lying! This evidence is fake. I would never do such a thing." I looked at her coldly, my heart unmoved. I had expected her to deny it. It was her usual tactic. I shook my head slightly and handed the evidence to the judge, signaling him to continue reviewing it. The judge took the evidence and carefully examined it, his brows furrowing deeper. Victoria's denial had no effect, only making her look worse in court. "Miss Victoria," the judge finally spoke, his voice steady and powerful. "This evidence shows that you indeed have an improper relationship with Mr. Ethan, which has severely impacted your marriage with the plaintiff. I hope you can face the facts and stop making baseless denials." Victoria's face turned even uglier. She wanted to continue arguing, but the judge had had enough. He waved his hand, signaling the court staff to stop her. In the end, since Victoria had contributed nothing to the family and the house was mine, the house was awarded to me, and Victoria left with nothing. But it wasn't over yet. I presented the proof of the $500,000 loan to the judge and explained the situation. The $500,000 was meant to cover household expenses, but was given by Victoria to her lover to buy a car. I asked the judge for a fair ruling. The judge, seeing this, was almost in disbelief. It was beyond everyone's comprehension that a woman could be so foolish. After verifying the situation, the judge ordered Victoria to return the $500,000, as it was not considered marital property. Victoria had no choice but to have Ethan pawn the car and scrape together the $500,000 to give back to me. Only then was the divorce finalized. When I received the divorce decree, I was very happy, though I didn't show it. Victoria looked at me with hatred and said coldly, "You'll never see me again." She thought I was still the man who loved her to the bone. Little did she know my love for her had long vanished through her repeated torment. Victoria was truly narcissistic. Looking at her now, I only felt pity. She grabbed Ethan's hand and said they were going to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Ethan didn't look very happy, even a bit displeased. Of course, he was only interested in Victoria for the easy life she provided. Now that Victoria had lost me, what could she offer Ethan? Seeing Ethan's reluctance, Victoria was shocked. She asked, "What's wrong?" Ethan, with a sour tone, said, "Get married? I have no money now. Even the car is pawned. How can I marry you?" Ethan was a master at manipulation, and Victoria fell for it every time. Her initial shock disappeared because Ethan's words were so convincing, making her believe it was a sign of his love. Victoria even glanced at me as if to say, "See, he's the man I want. You don't deserve me." I stood there unmoved. As a man, I knew Ethan too well. Victoria clung to Ethan's hand, looking at him with adoration, like a dog in heat. She said, "Ethan, I still have some savings. It's enough for our wedding." Hearing this, Ethan's eyes lit up with hope. The two of them left, holding hands intimately. Hearing Victoria's words, I felt my years of effort were wasted. Every month, my salary was deposited into Victoria's account, thousands of dollars a month, while I didn't even have $100 on me. Apart from household expenses, there were no other costs. My son wore the same clothes for several seasons, while Victoria changed her bags and clothes frequently. Despite this, she still felt her life was unsatisfactory, constantly complaining about her bad luck and comparing me to other husbands. I had always been careful to serve Victoria, cherishing our relationship, but Victoria repeatedly used my love to hurt me. I thought she genuinely didn't have enough money and often felt inadequate for not providing her a happy life. It wasn't until now that I realized Victoria had been secretly saving money all these years, waiting for Ethan to come back and marry her. My years of hard work were all for nothing. Looking at the red divorce certificate in my hand, I couldn't help but feel emotional. The marriage certificate was red, and now the divorce certificate was also red. Why wasn't the divorce certificate designed in black? But thinking about it, it made sense. Marriage is a happy event, and divorce represents a kind of liberation, also a happy event. Getting married and divorced both are happy occasions. Back home, Victoria called saying she wanted to come and get her things. I agreed immediately. Looking at her room filled with things bought with my money, clothes, jewelry, bags, I thought it was better for her to take them away quickly to avoid the sight. Soon Victoria arrived with Ethan in tow. They held hands, fingers intertwined, looking like a couple in love. It was disgusting to see, but it didn't matter. The sweeter they were now, the more painful it would be later. Victoria waved her marriage certificate at me, mocking, "Getting married to someone you love is different, right, Ethan?" She looked at Ethan with happiness, as if showing off a victory. I felt nothing, watching them like clowns. Ethan looked at me and said coldly, "Of course. It must have been hard for you all these years with this loser." I didn't indulge them. Now that we were divorced and the house was mine, I said, "Take your things and get out. The farther, the better." To them, my words seemed like the last angry outburst of a powerless man. Seeing my anger, Victoria laughed even more brightly. She said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Ethan and I are getting married in a few days. You must come." I didn't want to go, but seeing their disgusting faces, I decided to give her a big gift. After Victoria moved her things, I changed the locks to prevent her from bothering me again. I even hired a cleaning service to thoroughly clean the house, removing all traces of Victoria. Victoria and Ethan's wedding was announced to everyone. Many friends and relatives called to comfort me, telling me not to be sad. Some even offered to introduce me to a new wife. I pretended to be heartbroken, acting like I had been abandoned. I heard that Victoria's mother found out and had a big fight with Victoria, opposing the marriage, but in the end she couldn't stop it. Victoria had liked Ethan since childhood. They were childhood sweethearts. Now that she finally had the chance to marry him after his divorce, she wouldn't give it up. The wedding went on as planned, with many guests and friends attending. I prepared a special gift and left. That gift was Victoria's medical diagnosis. I heard that when Victoria and Ethan were passionately kissing on stage, the big screen suddenly displayed the diagnosis report. All the guests were shocked, and Victoria's face was full of disbelief. Ethan looked at Victoria with suspicion. Victoria tried to explain, thinking it must be fake, but Ethan's face couldn't maintain the happiness from before. Doubts had already formed in their hearts, and once the seed of doubt is planted, it's hard to remove. After the wedding, Victoria called me furious. "Was it you?" she demanded. I laughed and said, "So what if it was? Didn't you invite me to your wedding? This is my gift to you." Victoria went nearly insane, cursing me nonstop. I hung up the phone. The angrier she got, the more satisfied I felt. The pain she caused me was far greater than this. This was just the beginning. I planned to slowly repay her. Later, Victoria decided to go to the hospital for a thorough checkup. The results were shocking. She had a terminal illness, and it was in the late stages. It could have been treated earlier, but now it was too late. Victoria was admitted to the hospital immediately. I heard that the newly decorated marital home was never lived in. They moved straight into the hospital. One day at work, Victoria kept calling me, which was annoying. I finally answered. Her voice was filled with anger. "Did you know I had a terminal illness? Did you set me up?" she yelled. Her tone was so harsh it was unbearable. But since we were already divorced, I didn't hold back. I said, "Yes, I knew. The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate. Maybe you'll be a better person next time." My words nearly drove Victoria to madness. Her voice trembled with rage, and she started coughing. I didn't hold back, adding fuel to the fire. "Just got married and already terminally ill. Congratulations." I heard her urgently calling for a nurse, saying the patient was vomiting blood. Then the phone went silent and I hung up. After leaving Victoria, I focused on my work. My career took off. My boss appreciated my efforts and promoted me to manager of a branch office. Under my management, the branch's performance improved significantly. Meanwhile, Ethan was struggling. After Victoria was hospitalized, she found out she was pregnant. Ethan didn't want the child. He was only with Victoria for her money and didn't want the burden of a child. At the branch office, I discovered that Ethan's small company was a downstream client of my branch, and my company was their main client. It seemed even fate didn't want to spare Ethan. For years, he had used Victoria for his own gain, destroying my family and causing me so much pain. I didn't hesitate to cancel all contracts with Ethan's company. At this early stage of his business, our projects were crucial to him. Ethan soon called, speaking to the project manager, who was me. His voice was humble, almost submissive. I had never seen Ethan like this. It was quite ironic. He asked, "Hello, did I do something wrong? Why was the contract terminated?" I couldn't help but smirk, mocking him in my mind. After a moment, I said slowly, "Your company's scale is too small. Maybe we can work together when you grow bigger." Ethan seemed to recognize my voice and became furious. "Sincere, is that you? Are you behind this? Damn it, you set me up. You knew Victoria was terminally ill, didn't you?" His voice was like a roar, as if he wanted to come through the phone and tear me apart. I could imagine how ridiculous he looked in his rage. I couldn't help but laugh. I remembered how Ethan and Victoria used to flaunt their relationship in front of me. Now, seeing him like this was amusing. I lowered my voice and said, "Yes, I knew. I made you her rebound. By the way, I heard Victoria's pregnant. Congratulations on becoming a dad so soon." My words were full of sarcasm, meant to make him suffer. As expected, Ethan was enraged, roaring like a lion. "Damn you, Sincere, don't let me see you, I'll make your life miserable." Ethan had completely lost his usual gentlemanly demeanor, revealing his true nature. He continued to curse, "Who knows whose child it is? Whoever wants it can have it." I didn't know if he said that to provoke me. After all, I used to treat Victoria very well, and she often called me a simp in front of him. If he thought that way, it was laughable. Victoria now meant less to me than a dog. I sarcastically said, "Really? I wouldn't know. But you sure got a good deal. Buy one, get one free." As soon as I said that, Ethan started cursing at me. I hung up, not wanting to waste my breath on him. After terminating the contract with Ethan, I found a new partner, and the company's sales channels opened up. Ethan was indeed a cancer to the company. Soon, my salary increased from a few thousand to $50,000 a year. Victoria, You never expected this, did you? The loser you look down on is now a successful person. With my rising status, friends and relatives started introducing me to potential partners. They were all young women in their early 20s, prettier and with better figures than Victoria, and most importantly, with good character and no infidelity. However, after my failed marriage, I became more cautious about relationships, no longer reckless. Finally, through a friend's introduction, I met a girl named Sophie. She had a great personality, was very affectionate, and worked as an elementary school teacher with a decent income. Compared to Victoria, she was far superior in both looks and character. I cherished this relationship, but I had learned from my past not to give blindly. Sophie was also very good to my son. Every day she prepared a table full of dishes, and no matter how late I came home, there was always a light on for me. I wondered if I had known I would meet someone like her after divorcing Victoria, would I have been eager to divorce every day? The worst thing in a relationship is being with someone who doesn't appreciate you. I was the opposite, valuing Victoria too much, making her the most important person in my life, which led to her repeatedly hurting me. A few days later, Victoria called again, this time a video call. No good news comes from her calls. I decided to hang up, but she kept calling. I finally answered. I was surprised to see her. In just half a month, she had changed drastically. She lay in a hospital bed, wearing oversized hospital clothes with a breathing tube in her nose, her hair shaved off, and her body emaciated. She was unrecognizable, but her tone was still as harsh as before. She almost angrily said, "Did you terminate Ethan's company's contract?" Her tone was full of strong suspicion, as if I were still someone she could control. Did Victoria still think I was the same Sincere she could manipulate? I said, yes, I did, so what? I didn't show her any kindness. Seeing my attitude, Victoria was so angry she was gasping for breath, the breathing tube trembling. But she held back her anger and continued, "Sincere, why did you do this? Do you know how miserable I am now?" I snorted and retorted, "Miserable? More miserable than me? You were ruthless back then." Victoria was silent for a moment, seemingly adjusting her emotions. Then in a near-pleading tone she said, "Sincere, I know I was wrong before, but look at me now. Can you help me for old time's sake?" Seeing Victoria like this was amusing. She didn't come to me when she was sick, but now, with Ethan's company in trouble, she shamelessly begged me. "Victoria, you really are a love-struck fool." I couldn't help but admire Ethan's tactics. When he couldn't handle it, he pushed Victoria to act. I laughed and said, "I didn't intend to destroy you both, but he asked for it. I have to finish him off." My words completely enraged Victoria. She loved Ethan to death. Torturing him was worse than death for her. She couldn't stand it. Victoria almost screamed, "Sincere, how can you be so cruel? I curse you to die a horrible death." As soon as she finished, I said, "You'll die first." Then I added, "Don't call me again. I don't want my new partner to misunderstand." I deliberately showed her Sophie's fair hand. Victoria was stunned, her already pale face turning ghostly white, looking like a corpse. I felt that if I talked to her for 2 more minutes, she might die from anger, so I hung up. "What goes around comes around, Victoria. You have your day too. Do you know how much you hurt me? Now you want me to spare your lover, Ethan? Impossible. Sparing him means not sparing myself." After Victoria's call, I despised Ethan even more, vowing to make him pay. The next day, Victoria's mother came to see me, angrily claiming to visit Xiao Chen. I said bluntly, "We're divorced. Please don't bother us anymore." I emphasized the last few words. Victoria's mother saw Sophie busy in the kitchen and looked even angrier. She said, "What do you mean, Sincere? You just got divorced and already found a little vixen?" Victoria's mother looked like a fierce tigress, just like her daughter. When Victoria got angry, she was the same. Thinking back to my life with Victoria, even the smallest things not done right would make her scowl, as if she wanted to swallow me whole. She could say the most hurtful things. Many times I almost couldn't hold back, but for the sake of the family, I endured. My parents passed away early, and for many years I supported Victoria's mother. Every week I bought many supplies to visit her. Victoria had her own salary but was indifferent to this, leaving it all to me. Every year on her mother's birthday or when she had minor illnesses, I was the one running around. I clearly remember one time, at 2 in the morning, Victoria's mother called, saying she felt unwell. Victoria ignored it, and I drove back to my hometown in the middle of the night to take her to the hospital. Thinking back on these years of effort, I felt it was all for nothing. I said to Victoria's mother, "What? Should I mourn for Victoria after she cheated on me?" I didn't show her any kindness. After all these years, she never showed any gratitude, taking it all for granted. It was disheartening. Victoria's mother's face turned pale, as if my words had choked her. She couldn't say a word, which made me want to laugh. I continued, "If there's nothing else, please leave. Let's avoid misunderstandings." I tried to close the door, but Victoria's mother grabbed a nearby shovel and hit me over the head. I wasn't prepared, and the blow made my head bleed. In a daze, I heard her shout, "Teaching you a lesson for Victoria, you heartless man." I had no strength to fight back. The shovel was used for digging in the backyard, and the pain in my head was excruciating. The next moment, I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Sophie was by my bedside, crying with joy when she saw me awake. My head was wrapped in bandages, still aching, but the doctor said there was no internal brain damage. Poor Sophie. The nurse on duty said she cried all night, worried sick, saying she wouldn't live if something happened to me. It felt like a scene from a TV drama, but seeing the dark circles under Sophie's eyes, I knew I had found true love. Victoria had blocked my true love for so many years. If only I had met Sophie earlier, I wouldn't have suffered so much. She was understanding and didn't mind that I was divorced. Sophie made me nutritious soups, saying takeout was unhealthy, and insisted on feeding me herself. It felt like a dream. How could two women be so different? If I hadn't met Sophie, I might have thought all women were like Victoria. Sophie was a balm for my wounded heart. Before I was discharged, I decided to report Victoria's mother for assault. Sophie tried to persuade me to let it go, but I couldn't ignore the harm done to me. Repaying evil with good sounded ridiculous. I called the police saying, "Someone attacked me. I have surveillance footage." The camera at my door had captured the whole incident. The police quickly took my case, and with clear evidence, they arrested Victoria's mother. Without a letter of forgiveness from me, she faced 3 years in prison. Victoria kept calling me, and when I answered, she shouted, "Sincere, my mom was wrong, but you can't do this to her. She just hit you once, didn't kill you. Why are you so petty? Write the letter of forgiveness." I should have been angry, but I was just impressed. Even now, she was still delusional. No one would write a letter of forgiveness after hearing her words. Just hit you once, didn't kill you. How could anyone say that? I wanted to see what her heart was made of, to be so hard. I didn't show Victoria any kindness. We were divorced and I had nothing to consider. I said, "Really? Even with a knife to my throat, I wouldn't write it." My words were firm. Victoria's pale face twitched. I always thought she didn't care about her mother. Neither of them were good people. On the phone, Victoria's tone became sharp and piercing, pouring out all her dissatisfaction and anger. "Sincere, you heartless man, how can you do this to my mom? She's your elder. Now that you're doing well, you treat us like this. If you don't write that letter, you'll regret it. I won't let you off." Her voice grew louder, hysterical. Seeing her twisted face, I said firmly, "Show me what you can do, don't disappoint me." Then I hung up. Victoria looked half dead, threatening me. It was laughable. I was curious to see what she would do. After half a month of recovery, I returned to work. The branch's orders increased, and my boss valued me more and more. One day, Ethan suddenly came to our company, claiming our products had issues. He brought several suppliers with him, causing a commotion. Many people gathered, including an important client I had just met with. The suppliers, led by Ethan, were very agitated, loudly demanding an explanation from our company. The scene was chaotic, and my important client looked distressed, frowning at the situation. Seeing Ethan's smug face, I wanted to slap him. It was clear he was seeking revenge after our contract termination. Ethan pointed at me and said, "You're the project manager, right? What kind of garbage are you making?" His arrogance drew everyone's attention to me, expecting an explanation. Our company is in the food industry, and Ethan claimed he got food poisoning from our product, ending up in the ICU. This was obviously nonsense. Our food products go through rigorous checks safe enough for pregnant women and babies, strictly adhering to national food safety standards. There was no way they could be faulty. Ethan was clearly making trouble. I took the product from his hand, sniffed it, and quickly identified it wasn't from our company. I looked at Ethan and said, "Are you sure this is our product?" Ethan's eyes darted nervously, stammering, "Of course you should know your own products." I sneered and told my assistant to bring our company's product. I placed Ethan's product and ours on the table, unwrapped them. Our rice cake looked pristine under the sunlight. I fetched 2 transparent glasses, filled them with water, and placed a piece of each rice cake in them. Our product, made from high-quality rice, dissolved easily in water, turning it milky white. Experts know a rice cake's quality by how it dissolves in water. The 2 glasses showed a stark contrast. Ethan's product turned the water a pale yellow, unappealing, and clearly not ours. Ethan's face darkened. I turned to the suppliers and said, "You see, these are clearly different products. Our company's products are guaranteed in quality. You can test them in our workshop." Many were stunned. The suppliers Ethan brought began to understand our products and even expressed interest in long-term cooperation. Ethan's stunt backfired, making headlines. In today's climate of food safety concerns, our products gain positive attention, saving us advertising costs. Many merchants came to inquire about our products. I had to thank Ethan for this unintended promotion. I still remember how he left, humiliated. After this incident, Ethan stopped causing trouble at our company. Even Victoria was quiet, which seemed unusual. After our contract termination, Ethan's company faced financial crises, nearing bankruptcy, unable to pay employees. Victoria could endure this, but Ethan wouldn't let me off. This calm was just the calm before the storm. Sure enough, a few days later, Victoria came to my house in a wheelchair, pushed by Ethan. They were truly a pair, sharing hardships. Victoria looked terrifying, like a withered vine. Her once full chest now flat, her face gaunt, eyes bulging. Ethan must have insisted on her discharge, against medical advice. I was at home, watching TV with my son, who was playing with a toy gun in the living room. My girlfriend Sophie was busy in the kitchen, creating a warm atmosphere. Victoria's face changed seeing this, deeply hurt by the scene. She didn't expect my life to be so good without her, making her envious. Victoria's tone was as harsh as ever, her illness not tempering her. She said, "Sincere, why didn't you answer my calls?" I glanced at my phone, seeing dozens of missed calls. With the company's improved operations, I had many tasks and kept my phone on silent at home. I said, "Didn't we agree not to contact each other after the divorce?" Victoria looked at me without any embarrassment, as if I were a stranger. Yes, since leaving her, I looked much younger, rejuvenated by love, full of energy. At this moment, Sophie, hearing the commotion, came out. She wore a cream-colored dress, looking like a delicate beauty. Victoria's eyes were filled with complex emotions, shock, disbelief, and jealousy. I remembered she once said I would never find someone like her after leaving her. Thinking back, she was right. I never met anyone as bizarre and awful as her, spending money recklessly, neglecting the family, causing trouble, and cheating. She never treated us as her family, always treating my parents and our son the same way. "Who are you?" Victoria's voice trembled. She had never seen Sophie, and I hadn't mentioned her to anyone except a few close friends and colleagues. It wasn't that I didn't want to share. I just preferred a private, happy relationship over a high-profile one. As long as we were happy together, that was all that mattered. I looked at Victoria, sneering, and then warmly introduced, "I forgot to introduce you. This is my girlfriend, Sophie. We're planning to get married next week." Sophie blushed, looking even more adorable. Victoria was attractive, but compared to Sophie, she was on a different level. Victoria's face showed anger, her teeth clenched, eyes almost spitting fire. Ethan, behind her, pushed the wheelchair, his expression a mix of worry for Victoria and helplessness at the situation. "Sincere, how can you do this to me?" Victoria's voice was sharp and trembling, pouring out her resentment and anger. "We used to understand each other the best, and now you're so heartless, finding someone to replace me." Her words almost made me spit blood in her face. Even now, she narcissistically thought I found someone to replace her. I wanted to ask how she maintained such thick skin. It was unbelievable. I said, "Victoria, can't you see? She's prettier, younger, and more sensible than you. Replace you? Where do you get your confidence?" My words were like a knife, deeply wounding Victoria. Her face turned paler, her eyebrows furrowing, her expression twisted in pain, as if suffering a massive psychological blow. She clutched her chest, her terminal illness worsening with her anger, looking like she was about to die. Seeing her like this, I felt no pity, only satisfaction. She had done far worse to me. Sophie asked, "Honey, should we call an ambulance?" Her face was full of concern and fear. Ordinary people rarely see such scenes, and Sophie, a young, innocent girl, was understandably scared. I gave her a reassuring look and patted her hand, signaling her to go inside. If Ethan didn't call an ambulance, why should I? They came here on their own. It had nothing to do with me. Seeing Victoria's condition wasn't working, Ethan angrily pointed at me and shouted, "Sincere, are you even human? She was your wife." I wondered how he could say that. Victoria's choice in men was truly poor, finding such an idiot. It was laughable. I calmly said, "You seem confused. You're Victoria's husband now. We have nothing to do with each other." My words embarrassed Ethan. He looked at the suffering Victoria, showing no pity, only disgust. Victoria was no longer human. Ethan was with her for money and temporary pleasure. Now she was a burden, a liability. His reaction was expected. He said, "Aren't you afraid she'll die here? She's your son's mother." I wondered if they came to use Xiao Chen to get money. My brief hesitation made Ethan think I was scared. He continued, "Do you think a stepmother can replace Victoria's love? A stepmother is always a stepmother. Think carefully, Sincere." I crossed my arms, coldly watching Ethan without speaking. I looked at them like clowns, full of mockery. I glanced at Victoria and said coldly, "So what?" Ethan thought I was softening, his eyes showing smugness. I knew this was his idea. Victoria followed his words like a decree. Ethan finally revealed his purpose. 1 million. Not much. "I just want to cure Victoria. Your son can still see his mother." He thought his excuse was perfect. 1 million to cure Victoria, so Xiao Chen wouldn't be motherless. I guessed he used this to persuade Victoria, imagining her tearful gratitude. But I knew Ethan too well. Even if I gave him 1 million, he wouldn't use it to treat Victoria. He'd abandon her and run with the money. Only Victoria would believe such nonsense. I was the only one who'd sell everything to treat her, but she didn't deserve my love. Ethan was confident I would agree. Just then, Xiao Chen appeared out of nowhere, spraying water at Victoria and Ethan with a water gun, shouting, "Bad people die. Bad people." Children often see things more clearly than adults. Thinking back to Xiao Chen's speech at the parent-teacher meeting, it wasn't surprising he said that. Ethan's first reaction to being sprayed wasn't to help Victoria dry off, but to check his suit, angrily shouting, "You little brat, no manners." His true nature was fully revealed, the facade of a gentleman gone. I could tolerate him insulting others, but not my son. I grabbed the shovel Victoria's mother had used to hit me and said, "Who are you calling a brat?" Ethan seemed scared, quickly backing off, his tone softening. "Your kid has no manners, Sincere. Think about what I said. Don't let Xiao Chen grow up to regret it." With that, Ethan left with Victoria in a huff. Ethan didn't get the 1 million he wanted and caused more trouble. Early the next morning, he sent me several messages saying, "Sincere, you're heartless. Victoria has no money for treatment and is going to jump into the river. You better come and bring the medical fees, or you'll find a corpse." Reading Ethan's messages, I couldn't stop laughing. Did he think I still had feelings for Victoria? Trying to extort money with such a trick was laughable. I replied, "Then let her die. The sooner the better. Maybe she'll reincarnate as something better next time." My words were full of sarcasm, sure to infuriate Ethan. Just as I was about to put down my phone, Victoria called. I didn't want to answer, but I had time to play with these clowns today, so I picked up. It wasn't Victoria but Ethan, looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, standing on a city bridge, his hair blown in all directions by the wind. He pointed at the screen, shouting, "Sincere, you better bring the money today, or if anything happens to Victoria, you'll be responsible." I could feel Ethan's madness through the screen. I secretly recorded his words with another phone, in case he tried to blame me later. Watching Ethan on the screen, I said, "Responsible? Fine, I'll burn more paper money for her so she won't complain about not having enough." My words were full of mockery, meant to provoke Ethan. Ethan's face darkened, not expecting my calm and resolute response. He turned the screen, showing Victoria in a wheelchair by the river, half of it hanging over the water, held only by Ethan's hand. Though Victoria was emaciated, she still weighed at least 70 pounds, plus the wheelchair. Ethan wasn't strong, struggling to hold on. Seeing this, I was stunned, not out of concern for Victoria, but shocked by Ethan's actions. He must have been desperate for money to do something so heartless. Victoria was his wife, yet she was worth only $1 million to him. Ethan aimed the camera at Victoria, making her speak. Her eyes were full of tears, her pale face even more bloodless, looking half dead. She said, "Sincere, if you don't bring the money, I'll really die." I didn't know if she was speaking to me, Ethan, or herself. Her eyes were filled with regret, no longer arrogant and disdainful. After all she'd been through, she must have seen Ethan's true nature. Even the most love-struck person would reconsider at the brink of death. I smiled coldly and said, "Die if you want. It has nothing to do with me." Ethan seemed about to say something, but my words enraged him. He lost his grip, and the wheelchair with Victoria fell into the river, disappearing. I hung up, feeling a mix of emotions, relief and reflection. Victoria had always treated me coldly, but in those last moments her eyes showed regret. I never thought such a proud woman would feel remorse. Her fate was her own doing. My emotions were evident, and Sophie, sensing something was wrong, came over, holding my hand. I pulled her into my arms, full of gratitude. In the following days, Ethan's actions made headlines. The police contacted me for details, and I provided all the evidence. Ethan was charged with extortion and attempted murder, sentenced to life imprisonment, and all his assets confiscated. I was present when Ethan was taken away, his head shaved, looking haggard, a far cry from his former self. His eyes were full of complex emotions, never expecting such an end. Watching him go, memories of my 3 years with Victoria flashed through my mind. Just then my phone rang. It was Sophie, asking, "Where are you?" "Dinner's ready, waiting for you to come home." Her gentle voice soothed all my unease. I had my own family now and couldn't let painful memories dominate my life. It was time to start anew,